The grand hall of Space Station Harmonia buzzed with voices of 100 different species. Blue-skinned Arthosians stood next to the tall, four-armed Silurians. The small, quick-moving Vex darted between the larger beings. In the center of it all stood Ambassador Peter Collins, the sole human representative. Collins adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and took a deep breath. He was about to change the course of galactic history. "The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation will now begin," announced the moderator, a floating orb that translated all languages. "We gather to discuss the Krivac expansion crisis." Images appeared on the massive screen behind the speaking platform. Planets burning. Cities in ruins. 3 peaceful species already conquered by the reptilian Krivac Empire in just 6 months. The moderator continued, "The Krivac fleet now approaches Arthos Prime. We must decide our response." One by one, representatives took the platform. The pattern became clear. Fear ruled the room. "The Zentari Republic will maintain strict neutrality," said one diplomat. "The Pleiades Coalition offers our sympathies but cannot risk our own worlds," said another. Collins watched as the Arthosian ambassador limped to the platform. Elder Thex's blue skin had faded with age, and his voice shook. "My people face extinction," Thex said. "For 200 years, we have been members of this confederation. We have traded fairly. We have shared our medicine and art. Now we ask for help." The hall fell silent. No one moved. "The Krivac will not stop with Arthos," Thex continued. "They consume resources, worlds, entire peoples. Today it is us. Tomorrow it will be you." Collins checked his tablet. "A message from Earth. Authorization granted." The Arthosian's voice broke. "Is there no one who will stand with us?" Collins stood and walked toward the platform. The other diplomats watched with mild curiosity. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 80 years ago. What could they possibly offer? Elder Thex moved aside as Collins took his place. The human adjusted the microphone and looked out at the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds. "For decades, humanity has observed," Collins began. "We've learned your languages, traded goods, and shared knowledge. We've been grateful for your acceptance into the galactic community." He paused, his eyes finding the Arthosian elder. "The Arthosians were the first to welcome Earth. When a plague struck our colonies on Mars, Arthosian doctors worked day and night to help us. They asked for nothing in return." Collins straightened his shoulders. "Earth has watched the Krivac's expansion with growing concern. We have studied their tactics. We have prepared." A murmur spread through the crowd. "The United Earth Federation believes in the principles of this confederation. We believe that peaceful species must be protected. We believe that aggressors must face consequences." The hall grew completely silent now. Every eye, stalk, and sensory organ was fixed on the human. "Therefore, as of this moment, I am authorized to declare that the United Earth Federation is entering the war." The declaration hit the hall like a physical force. Gasps and clicks and electronic buzzes of shock filled the air. The moderator's orb flashed red. Point of information. Humans lack the fleet size and technology to effectively engage the Krivac Empire. Collins smiled slightly. "With respect, moderator, there is much about humanity you do not know." He turned to Elder Thex. "The first human battle group is already en route to Arthos Prime. They will arrive within 24 hours. The Silurian ambassador, respected for his wisdom, moved forward. "Ambassador Collins, you must understand. The Krivac will not see this as a minor nuisance. They will target Earth directly." "We are aware of the risks," Collins replied. "But why?" asked a Vex representative. "You could stay neutral, safe." Collins looked out at the confused faces of the galactic representatives. "Because someone must take a stand," he said simply, "and humanity has decided that stand begins here, today." As Collins left the platform, the hall erupted in chaos. The galaxy had never expected the young species from the small blue planet to be the ones who would dare to challenge the Krivak Empire. But they were about to learn what humanity was capable of. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood at the head of the long table in the underground war room beneath Geneva. Maps and holographic displays showed the movement of ships across the galaxy. 20 of Earth's top military and political leaders watched her intently. "Ambassador Collins has made our declaration," she said. "Now we show the galaxy that it wasn't just brave words." President Alan Rogers rubbed his forehead. "The Confederation thinks we're committing suicide." "Let them think that," said Hayes. She pressed a button on her control pad. A hidden panel in the wall slid open, revealing a large display of Earth's true military strength. "Operation Shadow Fleet is ready." For decades, humans had shown the galaxy only a small portion of their ships and weapons. Old vessels, basic technology, nothing that would cause alarm. But in secret shipyards hidden in asteroid belts and on moons without atmospheres, Earth had built something else entirely. Laura Mitchell, the president's chief advisor, shook her head. "We should have consulted the Confederation first, asked for help, and been told to stay out of it," said Hayes, just like everyone else was told today. Captain Daniel Morris stood. He wore the black uniform of the Shadow Fleet, with no visible rank or insignia. "My ships are ready, Admiral. The Defiance and her battle group can reach Arthos Prime in 20 hours. "What about the Krivak sensors?" asked Mitchell. "Their technology is more advanced than ours." Morris smiled slightly. "They won't see us coming." Chief Science Director William Park activated a hologram showing the sleek, dark ship. "The Phantom Drive doesn't just move the ships. It partially shifts them out of normal space. The Krivak will have no idea we're there until we open fire." President Rogers stood and walked to the window. Outside, the rebuilt streets of Geneva gleamed in the afternoon sun. 100 years ago, the city had been destroyed in the last Earth War. After that, humans had united, knowing they needed to be stronger before reaching the stars. "If we lose this gamble, the Krivak will come for Earth next," he said quietly. Intelligence Officer Eric Summers changed the display to show images of the reptilian Krivak. Tall, heavily armored, with 4 yellow eyes and powerful jaws. "The Krivak see us as primitive," Summers explained. "Their intelligence reports call humans clever primates at best. They believe our technology is decades behind theirs. And that's our advantage," said Hayes. "They don't know about Project Lazarus." Park touched a small metal disc on the table. It glowed blue. "The defense system is ready. If the Krivak attack Earth directly, we can activate the planetary shield." Morris checked his watch. "Admiral, my crews are boarding now. We need to launch within the hour to reach Arthos in time." Hayes nodded. "Captain Morris, your orders are simple. Protect Arthos Prime. Show the Krivak what humans can do. But remember, this is not just about winning a battle. It's about sending a message to the entire galaxy." The captain saluted and left the room. Rogers returned to the table. "What about the colonies on Mars and Europa?" "Evacuations have already begun," said Mitchell. "But we can't move everyone." Hayes faced the president. "It's time to activate all reserves, sir. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier." Rogers nodded slowly. "Do it." As the leaders filed out, Hayes stayed behind with the president. "Alan, there's something else you should know," she said when they were alone. "The Arthosians helped us once, yes. But there's another reason we're helping them first." "What's that?" "Their planet sits at a strategic position. If it falls, the Krivak have a clear path to 3 major Confederation worlds. We're not just saving friends. We're cutting off the Krivak advance before it can gain momentum." Rogers smiled slightly. "Always thinking 3 moves ahead, Catherine." "That's why humans will surprise them," she replied. "The Krivak play to conquer. We play to win." Across the solar system, the ships of the Shadow Fleet broke from their hidden bases, dark, silent, and deadly, they moved toward their jump points. The real war was about to begin. The Krivak invasion fleet moved toward Arthos Prime like a storm of metal and energy. 50 warships, each larger than anything humans had ever publicly shown the galaxy. Their hulls were covered with the trophies of past conquests, pieces of armor and technology taken from defeated enemies. Supreme War Master Drakul stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest. His yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the blue-green planet ahead. Status of the Arthosian defenses, he commanded. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Vexnar, bowed low. Minimal, Supreme One. 10 patrol ships, 2 orbital platforms. They have already begun evacuations. Drakul made a sound that passed for laughter among his kind. They flee like prey, as they should. Supreme One, Vexnar said carefully, our intelligence reports that the humans have pledged support to the Arthosians. The War Master turned, his armored tail sweeping across the deck. Humans, the primitive apes. He laughed again, louder. Let them come. It will save us the journey to their world later. Across the void of space, hidden by technology the Krivak had never encountered, Captain Daniel Morris watched the enemy fleet from the bridge of the Defiance. All ships report ready, Captain, said his executive officer, Commander Lisa Reed. Phantom drives functioning at optimal levels. We are completely invisible to their sensors. Morris nodded. Around the Defiance, 20 human warships waited in perfect formation. Their dark hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it. No running lights, no visible engines. Ghosts in the darkness. Lieutenant Garcia, is your fighter squadron prepared? Morris asked. Sofia Garcia's face appeared on a small screen. She sat in the cockpit of her fighter, helmet already in place. Raptor squadron is ready, sir. All pilots report weapons hot. Remember the plan, Morris said to all his commanders. We hit them hard and fast. Target their command ships first. Use the phantom shifts to confuse their targeting systems. He took a deep breath. For Earth, for Arthos, and for all free species in the galaxy, commence attack. The human ships shifted partially out of normal space, becoming blurs of motion that the Krivak sensors could barely detect. One moment nothing was there, the next moment the sky was full of attackers. On the Inevitable Conquest, alarms screamed. Supreme One. Enemy vessels, appearing from nowhere, shouted Vexnar. Impossible, growled Drakul. There were no jump signatures. The first shots from the human fleet struck the Krivak ships with devastating precision. Not random fire, but carefully targeted strikes against engines, weapons, and command centers. Return fire, ordered Drakul. But his gunners could not lock onto targets that seemed to exist in 2 places at once. Lieutenant Garcia led her fighters through the enemy formation. Raptors, Phantom Shift Pattern Alpha, target their fighter bays before they can launch. The human fighters moved in ways that defied normal physics, shifting partially in and out of space. To the Krivak, it looked like the small craft were teleporting short distances, making them impossible to hit. What technology is this? Demanded Drakul as another of his ships reported critical damage. In the darkness of space, the battle unfolded unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Krivak, used to overwhelming enemies with superior numbers and firepower, found themselves unable to bring their full strength to bear against enemies they could barely track. Morris watched as his carefully planned attack created chaos in the enemy fleet. Phase 2, he ordered. Protect the Arthosian evacuation ships. Lieutenant Garcia, clear a path for them. With pleasure, Captain, Garcia replied. Her squadron regrouped and cut through the Krivak formation, creating a corridor for the civilian ships to escape. On the Inevitable Conquest, Drakul's rage grew as he watched his perfect battle plan fall apart. These cannot be humans, he snarled. Not the weak species we studied. Vexnar checked the sensor readings again. The signatures match. Supreme One. They are human vessels. But their technology, it is unlike anything in our records. Drakel stared at the display, watching as another of his ships erupted in flames. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt something new. Fear. "All ships," he commanded, "regroup at these coordinates. We will adjust our strategy." The humans had won the first battle, but they had also done something far more dangerous. They had made the Krivak Empire take notice of them. Ambassador Peter Collins walked into the grand meeting chamber of the Galactic Confederation. The room was much fuller than before. Species that rarely attended meetings were now present, drawn by news of the human victory at Arthos Prime. Collins took his seat at the human delegation table. Messages and data streamed across his tablet. Reports from Captain Morris, updates from Earth, and analysis of the Krivak retreat. The moderator's orb floated to the center of the chamber. This emergency session will now begin. The first item: the military engagement at Arthos Prime and its implications. A tall, elegant Silurian rose from his seat. Ambassador Genlo was over 300 years old and rarely spoke at meetings. When he did, everyone listened. "For centuries, my people have watched the younger races," Genlo said. "We have kept our most advanced technologies to ourselves, believing few were ready for such knowledge." He turned to face Collins. "The humans have surprised us, not just with their victory, but with their willingness to stand when others would not." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "The Silurian archive will now be open to human scientists," Genlo announced. There were gasps around the room. The archive contained technological knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. Collins nodded respectfully. "Humanity is honored by your trust, Ambassador." Not everyone was pleased. The representative from the Vex Consortium, a short, quick-moving being named Trisk, jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous. The humans have disrupted galactic stability. The Krivak will escalate their attacks now. More worlds will suffer." Collins remained calm. "And what was your solution, Representative Trisk?" "Allow the Krivak to consume world after world unopposed." "Business arrangements could have been made," Trisk muttered. Nicole Bennett, Collins' political officer, leaned close and whispered in his ear. She had been analyzing trade data for weeks. Collins' eyes narrowed. "What kind of arrangements, Representative Trisk?" "Perhaps like the ones your consortium has been making with the Krivak, selling them navigation data for Arthosian defense systems." The chamber erupted in shock. Trisk froze. "That's a lie," he finally sputtered. "We have the transaction records," Collins said calmly. "Several Confederation members have been trading with the Krivak, helping them plan their conquests in exchange for profit." Elder Thex of the Arthosians stood shakily. "Is this true? While my people faced extinction, our allies sold us out." The moderator's orb flashed. "These are serious accusations, Ambassador Collins. Evidence must be presented." "And it will be," Collins assured them. "But first, there is something else the Confederation should know." He activated a holographic display showing a message intercepted from the Krivak High Command. "The humans must be eliminated before others follow their example. We are diverting 3 fleet groups to Earth sector. The planet will be made an example of." Silence fell over the chamber. "The Krivak are coming for Earth," Collins said. "Not because we are a threat to their empire, but because we dared to stand against them. They fear others will follow our example." The Silurian ambassador spoke again. "What is your request of the Confederation, Ambassador Collins?" "Not aid," Collins replied. "Earth will defend itself. But I ask you all to consider what kind of galaxy you wish to live in. One where aggressors take what they want while the rest stand aside, or one where free peoples stand together." Back on Earth, protesters gathered outside government buildings. News of the Krivak counterattack had spread quickly. "Why did we start this war?" shouted one protester on a vid screen playing in the Confederation chamber. "This isn't our fight." Collins watched the footage with a sad smile. "This is what the Krivak don't understand about us. Humans argue. We disagree. We question our leaders. But when the time comes to stand together, we will." As the meeting ended, A small delegation approached Collins, representatives from 7 different worlds, none of them military powers. "Ambassador," said their spokesperson, "we wish to discuss forming a coalition. If humans can fight, so can we." The first alliance was forming. The galaxy was beginning to change. Dr. Paul Wright sat in his lab on the research station orbiting Mars. Screens surrounded him, each showing different aspects of Krivak biology, culture, and military tactics. For 3 weeks straight, he had barely slept, trying to understand Earth's enemy. "You need rest, Doctor," said his assistant, Olivia Reyes. Wright shook his head. "The Krivak fleet will reach our outer colonies in 5 days. We need answers before then." He studied footage from the battle at Arthos Prime. The Krivak ships moved in perfect formation. Their attacks followed strict patterns. Even in retreat, they maintained rigid order. "They're too perfect," Wright muttered. "Too structured." An alert sounded. A new transmission had been intercepted from a Krivak command ship. Wright listened carefully to the harsh, clicking language. "Play it again," he said, excitement building in his voice. "Focus on the commander's reaction when the human ships used phantom drive tactics." The alien's voice contained something Wright hadn't heard before, a high-pitched note that the translation software had missed. "That's it," he said, jumping up. "That's their weakness." Out in space, the war expanded. The Krivak launched a major offensive toward human colony worlds. 3 massive fleet groups moved with deadly purpose. Marine Commander Ryan Jackson led the defense of New Montana, Earth's furthest colony. His troops were outnumbered 5-1. "They're coming in standard formation," Commander reported his sergeant, "just like the briefing said they would." Jackson nodded. "And that's how we'll beat them." Fireteam Alpha through Delta, move to position. Remember your training. Unlike other species who fought in large organized units, Jackson had divided his Marines into small, independent teams. Each had its own objectives and could make decisions without waiting for orders. The Krivak landed their troops in a massive, coordinated wave. Thousands of reptilian soldiers moved as one, following their commander's orders exactly. Jackson watched from his command post. "Now," he ordered. Human fire teams struck from multiple directions. They attacked, retreated, struck again from somewhere else. They targeted Krivak officers, disrupting the chain of command. Without clear orders, the Krivak soldiers became confused. Their rigid training hadn't prepared them for enemies who didn't fight according to recognizable patterns. Back on Earth, Director Susan Kelly of Earth Intelligence watched the battles unfold. Her network of spies and information gatherers had penetrated deep into Krivak territory. "The new data from Dr. Wright confirms our theory," said her deputy, Frank Mason. "The Krivak have a hierarchical psychology. Without direct orders, individual soldiers struggle to adapt." Kelly nodded. "And our soldiers? Fighting in ways the Krivak can't predict. Commander Jackson's fireteam tactics are proving highly effective." Kelly turned to the largest screen in her command center. It showed the position of all known Krivak forces. "They still outnumber us," she said, "but numbers aren't everything." Across the galaxy, stories began to spread. Stories of human ingenuity and adaptability. Of small human ships outmaneuvering larger Krivak vessels. Of human soldiers who could change tactics in the middle of battle. Supreme War Master Drakul received these reports with growing rage. "How can primitives resist us this way?" he demanded of his war council. Sub-Commander Vexnar displayed the latest battle analysis. "The humans do not fight like other species, Supreme One. They are unpredictable. They change their patterns constantly." Another council member spoke cautiously. "Our soldiers report difficulty engaging them. They call humans the chaos species." Drakul smashed his fist on the table. "Then we will respond with greater order. More ships, more soldiers. Overwhelm them with our might." But deep inside, the Supreme War Master felt something he had never known before. Doubt. On New Montana, Commander Jackson's Marines had pushed the Krevac back to their landing zone. The colonists cheered as the alien ships retreated. Jackson didn't celebrate yet. This was just one battle. The war was spreading across the stars, and humanity would need every advantage it could find. But for the first time, the galaxy was seeing what humans could really do. The emergency alert sounded throughout Earth's military command center in Geneva. Admiral Catherine Hayes stared at the incoming data with horror. "Confirm this," she ordered. Her communications officer looked up with grim eyes. "Confirmed, Admiral. New Washington and Freedom's Point are gone. The Krevac used some kind of new weapon. Both colonies were completely destroyed. 2 human worlds. Over 8 million people. Gone in minutes." President Rogers entered the command center, his face ashen. "Tell me we have a response planned." Before Hayes could answer, more alerts sounded. "Admiral," reported her tactical officer, "the Arthosians are pulling their ships back to their homeworld. The Silurians have closed their borders. 3 other Alliance members have sent messages requesting to withdraw from the coalition." The news feeds showed protests growing on Earth. People filled the streets with signs demanding peace talks. "End the war," they chanted. "Save our colonies." In the Senate chamber, politicians demanded the president's resignation. "You led us into a war we cannot win." Senator Greg Wilson shouted, "How many more will die before you admit your mistake?" Admiral Hayes turned away from the screens. "We knew this would happen." The Krevac always strike back hard to break morale. It's what they did to the last 3 species they conquered. "The difference is, we're not conquered yet," Rogers said firmly. A priority communication came through. Captain Morris' face appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted, his uniform torn and dirty. "Captain, report," Hayes ordered. "The intrepid battle group was ambushed at the Delphi system," Morris said. "It was a trap. They were waiting for us." He paused, finding the words difficult. Admiral Hayes' flagship was destroyed. The room fell silent. Catherine Hayes felt cold. The other Admiral Hayes was her sister, Elizabeth. "Survivors?" she asked quietly. "Some. Admiral Elizabeth Hayes is alive but critically wounded. We're bringing her to the Europa Medical Facility." President Rogers placed a hand on Catherine's shoulder. "Take whatever time you need, Admiral." She straightened her back. "My duty comes first, Mr. President." Captain Morris continued his report. "There's something else. We detected unusual energy readings before the ambush. The Krevac knew exactly where we would be. I believe there may be a security breach." "A traitor?" Rogers asked. "Or compromised communications. I'm sending the data via special courier. Don't trust the regular channels." After Morris signed off, Hayes turned to her security chief. "Begin a full investigation. Level 10 security protocols. I want to know how the Krevac are getting our battle plans." As the command staff left to carry out orders, Hayes and Rogers remained alone. "The Krevac revealed something today," Hayes said quietly. "A new weapon. Initial scans show it can trigger a chain reaction in a planet's core. They're calling it the Star Hammer." Rogers stared out the window at the peaceful Swiss landscape. "Can it reach Earth?" "Eventually. Right now, they need to get closer than our defensive perimeter allows." "And Project Lazarus?" Hayes brought up the classified data. "Still not fully tested. Dr. Park says the shield might work against the Star Hammer, but we need more time." Rogers rubbed his face tiredly. "Time is running out, Catherine. The Alliance is falling apart. Our own people want to surrender." "The Krevac don't accept surrender," Hayes reminded him. "They accept only domination or extermination." A young officer entered with a message pad. "Admiral, President, we've received a communication from the Krevac Supreme Warmaster." Rogers took the pad. The message was simple. "Withdraw all forces immediately. Surrender Earth to Krevac authority. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of 3 more human worlds. You have 48 hours to respond." Hayes and Rogers looked at each other. The darkest moment had arrived. Every previous species had surrendered at this point. "What do we do?" Hayes asked. Rogers straightened his shoulders. "We show them what humans do in our darkest hour." Across space, the Krivak prepared their Starhammer for its next targets, certain that humans, like all others before them, would break under the pressure of overwhelming force. They were about to learn how wrong they were. President Rogers stood before the United Earth Senate. All eyes were on him as he prepared to answer the Krivak ultimatum. The session was being broadcast to every human settlement across the solar system and colonies. 2 days ago, the Krivak Empire demanded our surrender, Rogers began. They destroyed 2 of our colony worlds to show their power. They threatened to destroy 3 more if we do not bow to them. He paused, looking at the faces of the senators. "My advisors tell me that surrender might save lives in the short term. The opinion polls show that many of our citizens want peace at any cost." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Rogers raised his hand for silence. "But there is something the Krivak don't understand about humans. We have faced extinction before. We have stood on the edge of our own destruction. And each time, we have found a way to survive." The broadcast cut to scenes from across Earth. People gathered in homes, public squares, and workplaces to listen. Then to the colonies, where settlers paused in their work to hear their president's words. "Our answer to the Krivak is this: humanity does not surrender. We will fight. We will endure. And we will win." A cheer erupted in the Senate chamber. Across human space, people stood a little taller. Dr. Paul Wright worked frantically in his lab. The breakthrough had come at last. "The Krivak aren't just hierarchical," he explained to Admiral Hayes. "Their entire psychology is built around certainty. They need to know outcomes. Their military, their society, everything is designed to eliminate uncertainty." Hayes studied the data. "And humans. We thrive on it," Wright said with a smile. "Our whole evolution was about adapting to changing conditions. It's why our tactics confuse them so badly. We're literally using their psychological weakness against them." In a secret facility beneath the lunar surface, Lieutenant Sofia Garcia led a daring mission. Her team had been sent to rescue prisoners from a Krivak labor camp. "Stay close," she whispered to the group of freed captives. "The shuttle leaves in 10 minutes." Among the rescued prisoners was a Zentari scientist who clutched a data pad tightly. "Lieutenant," the Zentari said urgently, "you must see this. The Krivak were not just using us for labor. They were experimenting on us, trying to understand different species' brains." Garcia reviewed the information. The Krivak had been studying how to control other species' minds, and they had succeeded with several high-ranking officials from different worlds. "Including Earth?" she asked, her heart racing. The Zentari nodded grimly. On the Defiance, Captain Morris and intelligence specialist Ben Martinez finally identified the traitor. Security footage showed General Howard Pierce, head of Earth's Defense Council, accessing classified battle plans. His eyes had a strange yellow glow. "Mind control," Martinez said, "just like the rescued prisoners described." Morris immediately sent the evidence to Admiral Hayes through their most secure channel. Back on Earth, Chief Science Director William Park stood with President Rogers in the control room of Project Lazarus. "The shield is ready," Park said. "When the Starhammer fires, Lazarus will not just block it. It will absorb the energy and redirect it." Rogers looked at the massive array of technology. "And you're sure it will work?" "As sure as we can be without actually testing it," Park admitted. "This is beyond anything humans have built before. We couldn't have done it without the data from the Xilorian archives." Across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. Species that had never taken sides were suddenly contacting Earth. The Krivak's brutality against human colonies had shocked even the most neutral worlds. A delegation of previously neutral races arrived at Earth. Their leader, a dignified being from a species called the Voltar, addressed the Earth Senate. "We have watched as humans fought alone against the Krivak. Your courage has inspired us. Your resilience has given us hope." The Voltar bowed deeply. We offer our ships, our technology, and our warriors to stand with humanity. Other delegations made similar pledges. The galaxy was changing. Humanity had shown that resistance was possible, and others were finally finding their courage. The Krivak had wanted to make an example of humanity. They had succeeded, but not in the way they intended. The Nexus system was a critical junction where multiple hyperspace routes converged. Control this system, and you controlled movement across 1/3 of the galaxy. The Krivak knew this. So did humanity. Admiral Catherine Hayes stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Resilience. Her injured sister Elizabeth had insisted on joining her, despite still recovering from her wounds. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said her tactical officer. Hayes looked at the massive fleet assembled around her. Human vessels were joined by ships from 27 other species. Some were longtime allies like the Arthosians. Others were former enemies who now recognized the greater threat of the Krivak. "The Krivak fleet has entered the system," reported her sensor officer. 87 ships, and, Admiral, they have the Starhammer with them. Hayes nodded. This was what they had expected, what they had planned for. "Open a channel to Captain Morris." Morris appeared on screen. The Defiance had been heavily modified for this mission. "Are you ready, Captain?" Hayes asked. Morris nodded. "We won't get a second chance at this. The fate of Earth and a dozen other worlds depends on this battle," Hayes reminded him. "Good luck." In the Nexus system, the combined fleet met the Krivak Armada. It was the largest space battle in the history of the galaxy. On the inevitable conquest, Supreme Warmaster Drakul watched with cold satisfaction. "The humans have gathered their allies for a final stand," he said. "Perfect. We will crush them all at once." "Supreme One," said Vexinar, "our intelligence suggests the humans may have developed countermeasures against the Starhammer." "Impossible," Drakul said dismissively. "No species has the technology to stop it. Prepare to fire." The massive Starhammer weapon began to charge. Energy built up in its core, preparing to release a wave that could crack a planet open. But the humans struck first. Using the Phantom Drive technology, their ships blinked in and out of normal space, confusing Krivak targeting systems. The Allies followed the battle plan Admiral Hayes had designed, attacking in seemingly random patterns that had been carefully calculated to cause maximum confusion. As the battle raged, Ambassador Peter Collins met with the Krivak's diplomatic representative on a neutral station at the edge of the system. It was a dangerous mission, but necessary. "Your species fights well," admitted the Krivak diplomat, "but it will not save you." "We're not here to discuss surrender," Collins replied. "We're here to offer you a choice." The diplomat laughed. What choice could prey offer to hunters? "The choice between a costly victory and a beneficial peace," Collins said calmly. Back in the battle, the Starhammer fired at last. Its energy beam lanced toward the human fleet. But instead of scattering, the human ships moved aside to reveal Captain Morris and the Defiance directly in the path of the beam. "Now," ordered Morris. The Defiance activated its special modifications. Project Lazarus came to life, creating a shield unlike anything seen before. The Starhammer's energy didn't just stop. It was absorbed, channeled, and redirected. Morris knew the Defiance couldn't survive the backlash. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered. As his crew evacuated, he stayed at the controls, making sure the energy was properly channeled. The Starhammer's own energy shot back at it. The massive weapon exploded in a blinding flash that temporarily disabled ships on both sides. On the inevitable conquest, Drakul stared in disbelief. Impossible. The destruction of the Starhammer turned the tide. The combined fleet pressed their advantage. The Krivak, their ultimate weapon destroyed, began to retreat. Hours later, a battered but triumphant Admiral Hayes received a message from Ambassador Collins. "The Krivak Supreme Warmaster has requested a meeting," Collins reported. "Not to discuss our surrender, but to discuss terms." Hayes smiled. and Captain Morris, found in an escape pod. He'll make it. 2 weeks later, Supreme War Master Dracul faced Ambassador Collins across a negotiation table. It was the first time in Krevac history that they had negotiated rather than demanded surrender. "You could have destroyed us after the battle," Dracul said. "Why didn't you?" Collins smiled. "Because humans understand something the Krevac need to learn. True strength isn't just about winning wars. It's about knowing when to offer peace." The galaxy would never be the same again, and humanity had found its place among the stars.